Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. This morning seems that I'm having some technical challenges as I was way into my video and things happened. I had to stop it. But let's go on with the video this morning. Hopefully I can get my thoughts together. Now, we are going to speak this morning about the US's hypocrisy with regard to Haitian deportation from that country. So here we have a disaster that is happening in Haiti, a socio-political and economic disaster in the country of the Sans Louverture and the United States, which often brags itself or projects itself on the world stage as the exemplar of democracy in the world, is deporting Haitians, and many of them are being deported as we speak. Now, this is under the Biden administration, and we heard during the Trump administration that Trump was racist and that he was unsympathetic toward Black people and people of color, right? And that the Democrats are generally much more amenable and much more sympathetic, and they believe in inclusion and they believe in equality and liberty and also brotherhood, right? The Democratic Party is the party of human rights, right? And they defend reproductive rights and all of these rights that humans can think about. The Democrats are there to defend, right? Right now, we're hearing that reproductive right is a primary reason for which you should vote for the Democratic Party, because they're going to give women their rights to abort their children and to behave in a very civil manner. Because, of course, being able, having the right to abortion and the right to kill innocent lives is something that shows civility, and it's a right that all humans, including women, should have, right? Great Democratic Party, and we should laud their efforts for doing such. However, the Biden administration continues to deport many Haitians in front of Americans. And those are of us, well, those of you who are on the left, I am not on the left, I do not share any sort of, I am a political agnostic, right? I do not believe in any of these political parties. I think that they work together and that most of their efforts are in Parliament or in Congress are done from a bipartisan effort, and they are not about representing the interest of the common man, something that we need to accept and to become aware of. There is no difference, there is no major difference between the Democrats and the Republican. We know that they are corporate parties and they have corporate interests and that they're aligned to the American elites. And I should extend also the global elites. The global elites work together. I mean, and when you look at the revolution of Haiti, the Haitian Revolution, you can see that clearly. And if you read the book, The Black Jacobins, to C.L.R. James, puts things into proper perspective. And you can see at times when all of these major empires, even though they were so-called at loggerheads, right, and they were antagonistic toward each other, but when it came on to slavery, they were united, right? When it comes on to the economics of how countries are run, the global elites are united. And this is what you have to understand, whether they be in China, whether they be in Brazil, they are united. Do not look at just the surface things that are happening, that you're seeing being fed to you in the mainstream media and say that China and the United States are fundamentally different. Yes, in terms of their political philosophy, their ideologies, they are different. We can't be stupid because that is so. However, when it comes on to economics, you can see that the global elites, whether in the United States or in China, they also merge to be able to make money, because that is what it is all about. Profit, what is lucrative or is not lucrative. So Microsoft is in China, right? And other US corporations are in China, And both countries, both these global elites are making huge quantities of money, right? At your expense. And that is what you have to understand. So here we have a situation in which the Biden administration is deporting a lot of Haitians back to the disaster that is called Haiti, because Haiti is a failed state, whether you and I like it or not. And let us contextualize why Haiti is a failed state. It is a failed state because France decided to have extracted, right? That was a criminal act when they went back to Haiti in 1825 and extracted from them, right? It was a scam. They scammed them of, all of this money that many are saying, right now would be equivalent to billions of dollars that could have or could be able now to develop Haiti's infrastructure. Now, that money was their money because they worked hard for France. It was Haiti that built up the French Empire. And yet still, because the slaves, rose up against slavery and were successful, France was offended. And they thought that they should have received reparations for the destruction of that economic system, because slavery was an economic system. A lot of times we tend not to think of how deeply entrenched in the economic realm that slavery was. And we just think of it as a social institution and some guys made some money from it. But it was a formal system, a formal economic system that was endorsed and permitted by the states that we live in at the moment. Something that we cannot forget, that the government of the day agreed and endorsed that sort of system. And why do you think they won't today? And they're still endorsing it, but you might not have the physical shackles over you. What we have now are economic and social shackles that they use, right, to control us, something that you have to understand, something that you must try to fathom, even though sometimes it's difficult. You have to delve into lots of reading about history so that you can make the connections. Because as I've said on this channel, many of us are incapable of making the connections, right? So I was reading an article in the Dominican today in which Amnesty International was seeking to excoriate, or they excoriated the Dominicans, saying to them that they need not to deport Haitian from their soil, but yet still the United States is doing it. And I'm not hearing or seeing Amnesty International excoriating the United States of America. She's not doing that. That organization, that is a hypocritical organization. I do not believe in any of these human rights organizations. They are hypocrites. They are hypocritical in every sense of the word. So we have here, Amnesty International urges Dominican Republic to end racist immigration policies. And we know the Democrats, right? The US Democratic Party loves to talk about racism, even though it's one of the most racist, if perhaps the most racist, well, it is more racist than the Republican in many ways, but we shall not talk about it on this channel right now. The Democratic Party has had that history of racism, and they never forsook it, right? They never forsook that path, but it's closed in different garment. And you think the garment that the Democratic Party is wearing now is one of democracy and equal rights and justice, right? Social justice, all about equality and becoming social activists and fighting for social justice. Now, Amnesty International issued a call to the Dominican Republic on Tuesday, urging the country to halt human rights violations against Haitians, Dominicans of Haitian descent, and Black individuals resulting from its immigration policies, which the organization labeled as racist. Now, we must understand that in some cases, the Dominican Republic has its problems. Right, it do. We are not perfect countries and we're not perfect people. However, we need to understand that among the problems the Dominican Republic faces is that it's a poor country. and it's trying to develop its economy for its citizens, because that is the main purpose of a government, right? To protect and to develop the economy so that its citizens can live decently, right? And do not have to immigrate, because the United States, right, is now clamping down on immigration in some cases. Not in some cases it's not, and in other cases it is. Because we see loads of other people going to the United States from Latin American countries. And does the United States have an agenda with those loads of Latinos, what we call Latinos? Because technically speaking, the Haitians are also Latinos. They speak a language that comes from Latin, one of the Romance languages. So they're also Latinos. They're not Latinos in the sense of the USA's narrow understanding of peoples and cultures. But from an educated perspective, and someone who is aware of Romance languages and cultures, Haitians are also Latinos, right? Get that in your cranium, because that is a fact. Now, we have look at what Amnesty said. In addition to halting deportations, Amnesty International urges authorities to investigate the allegations of racist violence and other human rights violations purportedly committed by immigration agents, police, and armed forces. But remember now that in 2021, when the Biden administration was also reporting many Haitians, and they had these horses and they were whipping the Haitians, right? It happened right there in the United States of America. And I'm not sure, I can't remember if I heard Amnesty International excoriating the United States for such a poor behavior and for such a violation, right? An egregious violation of human rights. I'm not sure if I heard Amnesty International. Where were they? Or are they also controlled by the same lamb-like beast, the United States of America? But there's something that I wanted to read that you need to look at. It says, in a joint letter alongside 6 other organizations, including National Human Rights Commission, that's the CNDH, Amnesty International appealed to President Louis Abinader and state institutions to cease deportation processes. The letter contends that these immigration policies perpetuate racial discrimination and result in discriminatory outcomes, particularly targeting Haitian and Dominican individuals. There was something that I'm missing, and I hope I can be able to, right, this is what I wanted to read you. Amnesty International calls for the guarantee of asylum access, entry, and residency in the country, stressing that Haitians have the right to seek asylum procedures without discrimination. So in other words, what they're saying is that Dominicans need to accept all Haitians into their country, right? If they don't, then they are practicing discrimination and they are racist. Wow. What sort of demonic, diabolical argument is that, right? Because I don't think that that can be true. The question that Amnesty International should be asking at the moment, why is Haiti currently undergoing that man-made disaster, right? It is because of foreign interests, right? Economic and political interests, right? The same guys who saying that they want to promote freedom and democracy around the world, right? Are the same guys who are the culprits, who are culpable for what is happening in Haiti at the moment. I think Amnesty International should be appealing to the United Nations, the core group, Canada, France, and the United States to stop that man-made disaster currently happening in Haiti so that the Haitians can build their country, because Haitians have the competency to build their own country and to forge their own future. And it's something that the United States has to grapple with and needs to allow the Haitians to achieve, right? Is something that also we need to give or to lend our support to the Haitian people. So that was very interesting when I read that particular article. Now, then we have in the listing diario, we have where the migrations authorities here in the Dominican Republic are rejecting any accusations from the Amnesty International about immigration or migration policies. And yeah, they have all rights. I do think that the Dominican government and also any other government in the Caribbean region and around the world have the right to declare whether or not they are going to accept foreign refugees. They do, because these countries in the Caribbean are poor countries, and they have also emerged out of a system of slavery and colonialism, and have not been able yet to build their economies. We have not yet undergone the industrial economic revolution that we see in North America, which is fast also dissipating at the moment, and in Europe. And it seems to me that these countries do not want to see these poor economies develop. It is a deliberate attempt to see us enmeshed in poverty forever. And that is why you have the IMF and the World Bank and the International Development Bank. Incidentally, yesterday I was reading the Patterson's report. That is a report that was given, or a research that was led out by Orlando Patterson of Jamaica, the Harvard professor and he was making his recommendations about how education can be improved in the land of Marcus Garvey in Jamaica. And, you know, as I was reading that report, I realized that it seems to me that the World Bank and all of these people are involved in that study, right? Or in that report that Professor Orlando Patterson made along with his other colleagues. I found that interesting because everything is controlled by these same interests. And if it is controlled by these same interests, nothing is going to come out of that report. And as Patterson, give him his credit, made in his report, Jamaica has a problem with implementation because, of course, these organizations would not want to see Jamaica implementing the recommendations that have been made to improve our educational system. So the moment I read, and I'm going to finish reading that report, and I'm going to try to extrapolate on what Patterson was saying about the education system, and I'm going to try to see if I can get Orlando Patterson on this channel, on the program, to see if he can give his, of course, he's going to be very politically correct. He's not going to be talking and critiquing organizations that perhaps he would have critiqued years gone. But, you know, we're going to try to get him on the program for all intents and purposes to see what he has to say about the education system in Jamaica and the report, the recommendations that he has made in that Patterson's report. But I just strayed here just to say that everything, every iota of our existence is controlled by these multilateral organizations. There is not one aspect of our lives, right, that is not controlled by globalists and global organizations. I just had to say that because even though I have a very critical mind, did not even make the connection when I heard about the Patterson report that somehow the World Bank and the International Development Bank, they would have had representatives or some sort of voice in what was happening in that report, right? I did not even think about it until I started to look at the people, because Patterson gave a very comprehensive report, as he normally does. Now, one of the things that we have to also take into consideration is the fact that the United States is an empire. I've been saying that, and I think that you're not understanding it. Recently, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and we were talking about voting rights and the fact that perhaps lots of the illegal immigrants now moving into the United States. The Latinos, not the Haitians right now, are moving there because based on what we're hearing, the US is going to allow some of these illegal, so-called illegal immigrants or, migrants, whatever you call them, to vote. And could that be a ploy to vote for the Democratic Party? Because right now the Democratic Party is in trouble, right? Is in trouble because Trump is leading the Democrats, and Biden is suffering from cognitive impairment. So we don't know what is going. How can he win with his state of mind? He doesn't have the cognitive abilities and the cognitive capacities to be able to compete with Donald Trump, even though both of them are old guys. They're senior citizens who are vying for the presidency of the most powerful country in the world, right? Make that make sense. But Americans love it because once they're having their McDonald's and they're able to go to Walmart and they can just live some nonsensical lives, they are quite fine with that. Now, one of the things that we have to understand is that the empire is an empire. It does not have two sides, right? It doesn't give you a choice. It doesn't give you an option. It's either you accept it or you suffer the consequences. Remember now that I think it's summed up in the word of George W. Bush after 9/11. You are either with us or against us. There is no middle ground, right? So when you're talking about the fact that it's impossible for Democrats to allow illegal immigrants to vote, you are in a la-la land. Because if the US goes to countries and it does what it does, or it deposes governments, right? Has, done many coups, has initiated and has executed many coups in which democratically elected presidents has been doing it from the 1950s. The US has been doing these coups from the 1950s, right? How is it that you can't even imagine that one of her parties, one of these democratic parties, can also allow illegal immigrants to vote in the United States, right? Where is your mind? Where is your ability to think? Because the same thing that happens in other parts of the world will be exported back to the United States, because the United States is not there to protect you. I hope US citizens understand that by now. It is there to defend the interest of the empire. And empire only thinks about its economic and political interest, maintaining that power, because power, absolute power, corrupts absolutely, right? Something that you always got to remember. We're winding down now, and there's something that I wanted you to listen to as we were talking about this aspect of empire. Yesterday, I was listening to Garland Nixon, and he had Professor Danny Shaw on his program. And Professor Danny Shaw was now, because he's no longer, a professor at the City College, College University. Is it the City College of New York? Yeah, something like that. Should have got my facts together right before coming on the show, but that's what he was. He was a professor of I think human rights and whatever. You can look up. But he had a stimulating conversation with Garland Nixon on his Garland Nixon show, right? The Garland Nixon podcast. And there was a point that Garland mentioned during the program. Incidentally, Professor Danny Shaw has been fired by his university because of his take on what is happening in Palestine and Haiti, right? He has been fired. So we should be sympathizing with him. And Professor Danny Shaw is also Danny is a Dominican American citizen, right? So he is of Dominican descent. Now, it's very interesting because, most Dominicans are noted not to be pro-Haitians, but he is actually Pro-Haitian, speaks fluent Creole, fluent Spanish, and English. So he knows what he's talking about, has been to the island many times, has lived there, and obviously he is a Haitian scholar in his own rights. But let us listen to what Garland is saying, and let me see if I could rewind here for a little so you can listen to the context in which they were talking, So let's go ahead.
Learn this. This information is for everybody. So there was always like bring a family member, bring a brother, bring a sister, bring a cousin, bring a confide today. Because so many of my students at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, they trying to live that American dream. Then they come into a course like mine where I'm trying to expose them to all the incredible thinkers that we have out here, and that's precisely why they want to get rid of critical educators. Shout out to Lisa. I wasn't the only one fired. I'm just the most recent educator at CUNY, at John Jay College of Criminal Justice that they have fired. They went after my colleague Lisa, who has a heck of a story to tell. They went after our brother Jairo in Texas just because we're anti-colonial. I mean, how long, Garland? How long can they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? That's not even what I was going to ask to quote Bob Marley. How long can they censor us like this? They took out my entire Twitter account. People can't find me on Twitter. I'm still there, but they can just push a button, call you a Nazi, put you in the KKK group, call you a skinhead as they call me every day, and just disappear you from social media. And then Elon Musk talks about we defend free speech and Biden, and they're taking out TikTok. I mean, it feels like the Democratic establishment is doing everything they can to pave the way for a second Trump presidency.
Yeah, because ultimately the ruling elite doesn't care. They don't care if it's Trump or Biden. You know what I mean? The ruling elite, it doesn't matter to them if it's Trump or Biden. They have their preferences, but in the end, they're going to get what they want. I also think it's important to understand. I'll put it like this. If you ever read, and I recommend people a book, I love to read, right? And all the folks back here, called The Sociopath Next Door. Important book. And one of the things they talk about is an example of a sociopath, right? And then if you think of a person who's out in the street and they're getting in fights and they can't get along with people and they're arguing and they're fussing with everybody around them, right? And when they come home and they got kids, you think they're going to be any different with them? You think they're going to come home and be gentle and kind? No. The sociopath doesn't give a damn about anybody in the street. And they come home and they don't give a damn about anybody in their own house. It's like addiction. A person who's addiction, it's a very selfish thing, right? We've all had family members and friends, and some of us have suffered from addiction, right? It's a very selfish thing. And the person who's in that mindset, they don't give a damn about people in the street or people at home.
Okay, so that is what it's all about, right? We see that the empire is not concerned about you. It is only concerned about defending its political economic interests. It's time for you to wake up and to understand that. And as Garland says, it doesn't matter if Trump or Biden wins the election that's coming, the upcoming elections in November. It doesn't matter because the empire will still get what it wants. Remember now that the president does not run the show, right? There are other forces behind the presidency that, runs the show and that sets the agenda, something that you need to understand. Another thing you need to understand, you need to study about the agenda. What is the agenda? And the best broad sweep of this agenda that you can learn from is a study of the prophetic books of Daniel and the Revelation. You need to study those books and to see how the US is involved, that God, for many years, has been warning us against these empires, of which the United States is one of the many empires that have come on the scene and the agendas. And if you read the former empires, be they the British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, if you read all of these things, the Babylonian, the Greek Empire, and all of these, Roman Empire, you will see parallels, that you will make parallels and you can see clearly the agenda. Some of the times I don't even have to, when I read something in the newspapers or I see something online, got the agenda. The agenda is so clear to me because it's in my mind. It's in my mind. And some of the things I might not remember, but as soon as I see them unfolding in our reality, I say, wow, that's exactly what is happening right now, right? And sometimes you will not have the physical evidence that this is what is happening, but you can make connections. And if you can make connections, it's best to listen to your intuition. Not everything you will be able to prove, because everything cannot be proved. People don't allow your phony education to let you believe that everything can be proved. When you're walking on the streets and you sense that somebody might pose a danger or threat to you, listen to your intuition. I'm not saying that you should go around and think everybody is a threat to you or poses some form of physical or whatever threat to you. I'm not saying that, but it is always good to be connected, especially if you're experienced and you are coming from that level of understanding that things do happen and you've got to take precautions before they happen, if they ever happen. That is. Now, that is what I wanted to say today. And I just wanted to say that we are living in some very dangerous times, and that the Dominican Republic has the right, along with other nations in the Caribbean, to accept or to reject, right? Any immigrants coming into their country, particularly if it affects their cohesion and also will uproot their economic achievements over the years. Now, this report I was given about the militarization of the Caribbean. And we understand that this has been happening for a long time, that the Caribbean region is being, as we speak, militarized. And that has been happening for a long time, right? And it's time for you to understand that. Let me read something to you here from NACLAS, right? I hope I can get it right here, share my screen with you. I need to go right now too, so let me end the video as fast as I can. The US Caribbean border is the often ignored third border, which the Department of Homeland Security has referred to as an open door for drug traffickers and terrorists. A recent study by the National Defense University has stated that the region's nexus to the United States uniquely positions it in the proximate US geopolitical and strategic sphere. Thus, there is an incentive, if not an urgency, for the United States to proactively pursue security capacity building measures in the Caribbean region. While the drones are unarmed for the time being, they will be primarily used to locate drug traffickers operating fishing boats, fast boats, and semi-submarines, and would relay information to the Coast Guards, Navy, or Caribbean authorities to carry out the interception and arrests. Now, when was it happening? Why is the United States militarizing the Caribbean? That is something that we need to understand. Now, look at what the connection is. The fact that drug traffickers are here. And by the way, they're looking also for terrorists. So the United States can also, if the United States gets to the Caribbean and say that, identify someone to be a terrorist, that person can be extradited, right, to the United States to receive whatever punishment by the law for being a terrorist, right? So we're living in a very dangerous world. So look at when they began, or probably before, but they started to implement the infrastructure for the militarization of the Caribbean during the Christopher Dudus saga that happened in Jamaica. This is especially important in light of how the extradition, well, I should probably give you the context of what was happening with the drug cartels, because you know that Christopher Dudus Cook was a drug cartel. So let me read this. This is especially important in light of how the extradition of Jamaican kingpin Christopher Dudus Cook was handled. In September 2009, the United States requested his extradition to face drug trafficking charges, but Jamaican Prime Minister Bruce Golding blocked the request due to his deep political connections with Coke, which is true, right? It was only after months of intense pressure that Golding caved in May 2010. Jamaican police and the Jamaican Defense Forces led the bloody operation to arrest Coke, which resulted in the deaths of more than 70 civilians, the vast majority of which were unarmed. So these people were unarmed. They did not pose a threat to the US authorities, neither to the Jamaican state. Just wanted you to understand that. So sometimes, just by protesting, right, even though you are unarmed and you might not pose a threat to government. And what about the right to assemble and to have protest against your governments? Okay, we're seeing that fast disappearing. Hope you are getting the message. Now, the resulting scandal led to the downfall of Golding as prime minister, but highlighted the power that drug traffickers and gang leaders have had in Jamaican government and politics. Now, this article did not contextualize the reason why Golding stepped down and that he undemocratically stepped down, right? It was not because the people voted him out of office. He just had to step down. Wow. It has since been reinforced that the operation was assisted by the US government and carried out to a large degree at its behest. So it's not that the Jamaican government was the major actor in that Tivoli Gardens incursion, as the Jamaican newspapers would like us to believe. Information has emerged which reveals that a US spy plane participated in the raid of Coke stronghold of Tivoli Gardens, and a Freedom of Information Act action, whatever that is, has recently been levied against the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, by a group of law students to reveal extent of US involvement. So when I clicked on this Freedom of Information Act action, right? Twisting my tongue, right? Look at this. This information is scrubbed from the internet, right? This information, that was document that was written by, I'm sure, probably students or professors at Yale Law School, has been scrubbed from the internet, like many other documents, right? Has been scrubbed from the internet. It means, therefore, that information that the government does not like, that might be true, that could have serious impact of how you perceive your government, can be scrubbed from the internet. We call that, by the way, malinformation. You have disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. And malinformation is when the information is true, but if it's going to be damaging and give you a negative perception of your government, it means, therefore, that the government has the right to eliminate and to get rid of such information. Welcome to the brave new world, right? Where democracy and your freedoms are at the forefront of all government activities and actions. Thank you so much for joining. Wish to see you, hope to see you rather, in another video. All the best to you. Bye-bye.